The Democratic Party has been wiped out at all levels of government, and this is because they decided to move away from the grassroots and rely almost exclusively on big money donors. I'm talking about the billionaires, the multinational corporations. Now, as a result, this has facilitated their shift to the right, and they left a huge portion of the electorate on the left abandoned. And this is why they're losing. They're being neglectful of their constituents, and they're failing. So Bernie Sanders, thankfully, is someone who said this to them. He called them out in a reality check that I think they desperately needed to hear.
Being in the minority here in the Senate, minority in the House, having a right-wing Republican president, the only way we're going to win this, and I think we can win this, is when millions of people stand up, especially in states that Trump carried, and say, excuse me, we did not elect you to be president to throw us off of health care. We did not elect you to be president to cut back on the child care that we desperately need.
Sure.
That's not why we elected.
Well, the implied in this is that there was a bit of neglect from the Democratic Party in the past.
A bit of neglect?
Yeah.
No, not a bit of neglect. An enormous amount of neglect. The truth is, and I think anyone who objectively assesses the situation has to appreciate that the model that the Democrats have followed for the last 10, 20 years has been an ultimate failure. I mean, that's just the objective evidence. We are taking on a right-wing extremist party whose agenda is opposed time after time, issue after issue, by the vast majority of the American people. Yet we've lost the White House, the U.S. House, the U.S. Senate,
most state
two-thirds
legislators
of the governor's chairs, and close to 900 legislative seats all over this country. How can anybody not conclude that the Democratic agenda and approach has been a failure?
Yep, he pretty much nailed it. Democrats are failures. And in spite of this fact, they know that they're unpopular, yet they are unwilling to embrace any progressive reforms. Why is that? It seems like common sense. Well, the reason is simple. It's because what they're doing is they are hoping to implement the same strategy now that they used during George Bush's administration. Their goal is to stay the same, but just wait it out. And when people get sick of Republicans, they'll come crawling back to the Democratic Party with open arms. So after the Clinton years, when George Bush took office, they were too hawkish. I mean, some of them voted for Bush's war in Iraq, and they were unable to regain power. But they didn't change because they knew they didn't have to, because the American people would ultimately become so dissatisfied with Bush that they'd be welcoming back the Democratic Party with open arms. And we all did that. We elected Barack Obama in a landslide. And now, just 2 months into Donald Trump's presidency, they think they may not even have to wait another 8 years. It might just be 4 years when we're so sick of Republicans that we elect even the shittiest Democrats that are marginally better than Republicans. So they know that all they have to do is continue being a little bit less shitty than Republicans, and one day they're going to get power back. But in doing this, they will perpetuate the same cycle where we get a shitty Democrat for 8 years that we're disappointed in, then we get a crazy Republican, then we get another disappointing Democrat. And I'm tired of the pendulum swinging back and forth. It's time for them to embrace progressive change once and for all, because as that pendulum swings back and forth, the American people get more and more disenchanted with both parties, and we're all in a worse off position because of this. So to break this cycle, all you have to do is listen to what your voters want. I mean, Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, we all effectively want the same thing. You have to talk to people. And Bernie explains how this isn't that difficult.
I think essentially, and why I really dislike this red state, blue state business, is that my personal record, and what I believe to be the case, is if you talk common sense to people, if you ask people, do you think your kids should be going to tuition-free public colleges and universities? You know what people will say overwhelmingly? Yeah, I do think so. Do you think we should give tax breaks to billionaires? And people say, you're out of your mind, you're crazy.
And it's really just that simple. And we saw how powerful it is when politicians talk to constituents during a town hall that MSNBC had with Bernie, when he literally convinced the Trump supporter to support some of his ideas. I mean, he converted this individual in real time. So it doesn't make sense that they're not embracing this strategy unless you realize that the Democratic Party has no idea how to talk to voters, which I talked about in a couple of episodes ago. I did a segment as to how they literally attended a retreat that trained them on how to talk to voters because they were so out of touch. They never left Washington for so many years that, they just had no idea. They were clueless on how to talk to average people. It's so embarrassing, but we want what everyone wants. We want opportunity, real opportunity, and we don't just want you to pay lip service to us and say, yes, I want to give you opportunity. I want to break down the barriers. I want you to tell me specifically what policies you will implement to give me the same opportunity as the rich. But they're not doing that. They have no message. They have no vision. Now, my question to Bernie Sanders is, after stating and knowing, the obvious fact that the Democratic Party is a huge failure, why do you continue to work with them, Bernie? I mean, work with them where you can on certain policies, but it's time for Bernie Sanders to lead a new party. Now, I studied electoral engineering in graduate school. I know that getting a third party started is nearly impossible. You can't have a new party actually be prominent unless one of the other two parties collapses, but you don't even need a party that's electorally viable. You just need enough people to migrate over to that new party, and they would obviously follow Bernie Sanders. And if that happened, the Democratic Party would shit themselves, and they'd realize that they have to come back to the left. But they have no left-wing check. The Green Party just isn't big enough, as much as I love them, to really be an effective check on the Democratic Party. So they're just following the Republicans and moving more and more to the right and abandoning these left-wing voters. But if you form a new party, enough people will follow you, Bernie. We trust you. We believe in you. Start that new party, and even if it's the case that you get no people elected from that party, you're sending a message to the party that we have leverage and we will not support them no matter what. So, I mean, in the end, I think that this is a reality check that they need to hear, but are they going to be receptive to that message? No, I don't think they will be, because they've shown time and again that they not only don't care what we think, but they have contempt for progressives, and they shoot us down at every possible chance. So, Bernie Sanders can say that they're failures, but unless he really channels his energy into a new party, I don't think they're going to be inclined to listen to us, because they're not threatened by us. They need something that scares them, and a third-party threat that's led by Bernie Sanders, I think, would do the trick.
Support this podcast by joining the independent progressive media revolution today at humanistreport.com.